So we have mentioned at least before on this channel what might happen in the aftermath of the Ukraine war. Now, this may not happen almost immediately overnight, but if you're Vladimir Putin and you've got what 600 maybe 650,000 troops currently under arms, um you're not exactly going to maybe disband those troops almost immediately, nor are you going to maybe let, shall we say, opportunities pass when you just happen to have that many troops under arms. Um, and this is where, once again, we raise the prospect of where might Putin and Russia decide to strike next. And this goes back to the whole core concept of Russian nationalism. And very, very clearly, the one of the former presidents of Chechnya, believe it or not, a guy called Dubrov, I really that's how you say his name, but he was assassinated in 1996. But when he was president in, I believe, 1995, he said it very, very clearly that Russian imperialism has no borders. That Russia considers all this area their backyard. This is ours. You might have a government, but really, you know, we're the ones in charge. And we have seen this constantly. Ukraine for the past couple of years, that has been the case. This has been this Russian imperialism has no borders, despite what the Ukrainian government might say it wants to do, what it wants to do. Well, if it upsets, Moscow, sad day for Ukraine. But that should not be the case. Ukraine, as we've said many, many times, is an independent country, should make its own decisions, has the right to, and join whatever, be it defensive blocks, economic blocks, it wants to choose without interference from another country. I think we can all pretty much say, yeah, that's how it should go. However, I came across this on Twitter today, and this comes from a on the Russian propaganda side, and this is what he had to say. I'll read it out to you, but I think it's very, very clear that as far as many of these Russian propagandists are saying, Ukraine is not the end. That to secure Russia's long-term security, as we'll get into a moment, we have to look at not only the Balkans, but Central and even Eastern Europe. And this is what, again, is a core of Russian nationalism. This is what these people are sort of pushing as like, this is where, we should be. This is where we should be as Russia. And this, as we'll show in a moment, has the potential really to start a lot of conflict. So once again, I say, we as Europeans really need to look at the threat that really Russia does represent to the whole of Europe. So this is what this guy had to say on Russian TV. So he says, a settlement in Ukraine will not solve anything at all. It will not even be a respite. If it is necessary to resolve the other issues of entirely complex from the Arctic Ocean down to the Mediterranean Sea, let's assume that a settlement will take place, even on terms convenient for Russia, to put it mildly. But what is Russian security? The security of our allied state without the Balkans. How can that be imagined in general? How can it be imagined without securing the Baltic? Polish directions? Will Kaliningrad just fly off somewhere? Will the northern and northwest borders of Belarus do the same? Absolutely not. Therefore, I am convinced that we've talked about the long-term prospect. It will be in Russia's return to the Balkans and Russia's return to the Central and Eastern Europe. And then it goes back to sort of saying that again. And it does go to show you what they seriously do consider as, their long-term prospects of what they want. And of course, these are, as you can see here, the long-term prospects. So I have always predicted, hang on, let me get my pen here, that the next big targets are definitely Georgia and Moldova. Like, those two are probably, if not the next targets after Ukraine. Remember, Russia really wants to secure a big long-term addition to its borders. So this is sort of, again, the current borders here of Russia. What it wants to do is it wants to expand, of course, first of all, taking this part of Ukraine, but then going all the way down, all the way to Odessa. And that is essentially a big, big addition to their territory. But what it would do is it would give them a land route then to access to Moldova. Now, of course, if you know about Transnistria, there's over 100,000 Russian troops stationed in Transnistria to keep this, puppet government that has basically said, the Soviet Union never fell, but we are still Russians. We want to remain that. And of course, recently we had the Moldova elections. Well, not the elections, but the referendum, where it said very plainly, very clearly, it wants to join the EU. Georgia, exactly the same, wants to become more of a European country and sees joining the European community as a way to rid itself of, of Moscow. But once again, you've got to look once again at where other it was saying. So it's saying, well, Balkans. And we've talked about these three countries at length: Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, constantly talking, of course, about these Russian propagandists, the idea that these Baltic states are as Russian as Moscow itself. So it is very, very clear they have designs on Eastern Europe as well. He talked about Belarus, its borders. Constantly, a lot of people say eventually Belarus will become annexed into Russia at some point. I think a lot of Belarusians will be very, very upset at that if that happens, but a lot might not be. And of course, that is about securing its northern and, of course, southern borders along here. The other, of course, big key thing is, Kaliningrad, which is like right here, that very Russian enclave. And of course, he talked about returning to, to Central Europe. Well, who is, of course, the most Central European country here? Well, it's Poland. So Poland, absolutely a target. And you are seeing far right groups in Poland, probably being funded by Russian money, to sort of prop up a lot of that stuff. You're seeing them do exactly the same thing with Romania. Hungary, of course, Viktor Orban, massively a fan of Putin, wants to sort of, keep that up as well. There is a lot of pressure that Russia is now adding constantly to these places, to you know where it wants to go next. And of course, these are now worry points where we have to look at the future of defending and helping to, maintain the freedom of these countries, to make sure that there is not Russian interference, as we saw in the Moldova elections. Um, there's even evidence that we can see that they were paying people from Transnistria to come and vote in these elections to try and alter the result. Luckily, they managed to win a very small margin, but that, I think, now is as we saw Ukraine do a long time ago as well, that upset Putin, and it upset a lot of the Russian nationalists, and they will now probably take that as a personal insult. That well, now we need to return there to return proper government. So I've said it before. I think the next obvious targets are, of course, Georgia, Moldova, depending on how Ukraine goes. But you can see very, very clearly they have ambitions well and truly beyond just Ukraine and those two countries as well, into sort of the Balkans, Eastern, and even Central Europe. So this would be something we have to really, really start taking seriously for defense of all of Europe. And it's a situation where all of Europe should come together on this. So, as always, thank you very much for watching. And of course, we'll see you all next time.